This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10.5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah, copy.
Welcome back, podcast listeners. It's great to have you along with us. If you haven't already listened to Brad Butterworth Part 1, it's worth checking that out first. You get a real sense of the man and how he developed into such a force within our sport. In this part, we are really into the meat of his career, racing with Russell Coutts, winning the Cup and defending it at home for his proud nation, and then all that followed. I won't spoil the surprise if you don't know the story. If the behind-the-scenes goings-on in Cupland is your bag, then you're in for a real treat. If you're enjoying what you hear, then head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's easy to use, I promise, and your support is really appreciated. It allows us to stay ad-free and to keep on delivering these uninterrupted pods. If you've supported us already, then many thanks. Right, let's get on with it. Here he is, and to get things underway, we're at the 1998 Sydney Hobart race. I hope you enjoy part 2 of the time I spent with Brad Butterworth.
It's a hard thing for them to do, but they should have cancelled that race or delayed it. If somebody goes over, you'll be lucky to retrieve that person. 70 knots, you're just surviving. That's a hurricane. You don't want to poke Coutts too many times before he pokes you back, you know.
Brad, in 1995, you're 36 years old. You've won the America's Cup for your country, for New Zealand. The sailing world is wide open to you. There's a ton of avenues to go down. But before we get back into the Cup, let's talk offshore. You'd won the Whitbread with Peter Blake in '89. But in 1998, you did this Sydney Hobart race on board Larry Ellison's Sayonara. It was an edition of the race that would end in tragedy. 6 lives lost, the fleet devastated by hurricane winds. What do you remember about the start of that Sydney Hobart?
Actually, the lead up to it was was just really sort of, I think it is a lesson that it hasn't quite been learned. But the lead up to it was, the weather forecasting was getting worse by day leading up to that. And so I'll never forget what happened in that race, because obviously, guys that we all knew, Glenn Charles, perished, and there was a lot of people that we knew that was it was just a tragedy that shouldn't really have happened, And you can blame a lot of people. You can blame the sport. You can blame everything. But I mean, sailors usually, or sports people, if they're going to run a competition, they very rarely try to cancel it because of bad weather or whatever. They just push on and do it. But that day, Dixon and Chris Dixon was the skipper of the boat. Larry Ellison was sailing on board with actually Lachlan Murdoch, which was Rupert Murdoch's son, was on board. And we had a really strong group of guys with probably 6 to 8 Whitbread or round the world race veterans, And I went to the pre-race weather forecasting, and the Met guys there in his father Christmas hat. Beautiful sunny day in Sydney. Has the map up, has these 2 converging systems, and says, you might get quite a bit of wind in Bass Strait, but, don't think. And so somebody says, well, how much wind? He says, you might see 50 knots. And, and there's just disbelief, because people just don't believe those guys, So I'm going, Jesus, okay. So then we go back to our own private, we have breakfast together down in Rushcutters Bay, and Clouds is there, Roger Badham, who was doing the weather, and he said, listen, this is not good. It could blow 70. And I'm going, Jesus, I don't know if they should start this race, because there's a lot of boats that just won't cope with that. 70's a hurricane. Anyway, I told most of the guys, well, they all listened, but they didn't really. And so, all the light wet weather gear went off the boat, all the heavy wet weather gear, all our harnesses became attached to our wet weather gear. My boots, instead of sailing shoes, showed up. We just went off fully worked up, ready to go. And basically it's a hard thing for them to do, but they should have cancelled that race or delayed it by 2 days. Would have made a big difference. But it was a beautiful day sailing out of the Sydney Heads, beautiful sunny, the full-on Sydney farewell, fantastic. And then that night, that southerly buster came in and it just got worse and worse and worse. And then the wind gear blew off the top of the tree at 72 knots. Well, it took us 4 hours to put the storm jib on. The sea state was so bad. And Joey Allen and those guys, just muscling things up. And then our boat just shut down in terms of personnel, and we had basically relying on, we was flicked into sort of survival mode, and, guys like Robbie Naismith and actually Hamish Pepper did a fantastic job, but Tony Ray, just those guys that we've sailed with through their career, and they just were solid all the way through. But you could just hear it on the radio that night. It just went bad because our navigator was Mark Rudiker, who's actually died unfortunately now, but he was a great guy, and he was calling them saying, it's blowing 50 and sea states this, and it's not good. And so you could hear those, and then the maydays just started coming in. And actually the port side of our boat sort of gave away. We had to tack over and brace it up. Actually, tugboat was sailing with us, and he was a boat builder. He's a boat builder for Oracle, obviously. And so we went and had a look at it. Larry wasn't too happy about that. But we had tacked over, and by that stage we could get into the lee of, or closer to Tasmania. But it was like a wake when you got to the finish. It was not good. Everybody just left, got off the boat and left. Larry actually did a little speech about, how achieving, surviving sort of thing, which was very good, but it wasn't very good, very bad.
Did you ever think about not going? I mean, I bring that up because I was in Sydney that year, and actually with Glyn Charles, who did die, had been part of the Olympic team, and he was there coaching with some of us. And I remember in that build-up, actually, he didn't want to go. I mean, if you know a little, you have reservations about what you're taking on. But he went anyway. Yeah. And I often think that, that we're not very good at making our own decisions, really, whether to go or not.
No, there's a lot of peer pressure, because he would have had mates on board that wanted him to go. And I think that's where the sport should take over and should say, look, we're going to it's a hard decision, but we're going to cancel it, or we're going to delay it, or whatever. Especially 50 knots. 50 knots, things change dramatically at sea. So 50 knots becomes, you can't retrieve. If somebody goes over, you'll be lucky to retrieve that person. 70 knots, you're just surviving. That's a hurricane. We were in 70 knots. We were, we had a trisalon and a storm jib on, and that was too much. And we were just trying to slow the boat down and just get through that part of the night. And then the next day, things sort of, didn't really back off until we got up until right up until Tasman Island. It was pretty bad. So I think we do a bad job with that.
How did that race affect what you've taken on since?
Well, I was keen to quit offshore sailing. That's for sure. I didn't want to go back to do the Hobart, but I did eventually. But it was, it left a mark on me. I wasn't that happy with that, because it was, and we were in a big boat, and we were, it blew really hard, and I think we were good at that, seamanship and stuff like that. We were relying on what Blake had taught us. So, all that sort of stuff came out, which was good. But, it was a bit too close to the bone that when somebody dies in our sport, it's just not on the menu, It's a bit like when, Bart died in San Francisco, it's just not on the menu, A day race, somebody loses their life. It's not good.
Well, back home, and attention was turning to the defence of the Cup. What was the feeling in New Zealand? So Peter Blake was involved, Russell Coutts, of course. Momentum was gathering. What was that period like in the build-up to 2000?
It was pretty intense because we were sort of on our own, and we'd try to run some, we called them green boat regattas here, with the boats from the time before, the far boats that we'd built a lot of for 92. And so teams would come down and sail against us in these regattas. I think we did, we were good. We did a good job of that in terms of being able to be competitive, having these boats that were user-friendly, so that teams weren't using their technology or anything, and they felt reasonably comfortable, although they probably thought it was a bit one-sided in terms of it was our boats and, how we let them sail them and how we, the time they got to train and all those little things that add up to whether you're happy or not. But it's, I think we did a good job with that, and that made a big difference long term. And we had different guys sail. Murray Jones did one regatta where he sailed the boat, and Coutts and I were out of it. And we were trying to bring, younger guys like Dean Barker, and that they were sort of coming in. We were using those guys a lot to try and lift, the quality and the strength of the team.
Why was that important to you?
Because I think we had a vision of the future that we could, make this, we could keep it for a long period of time if we had the right formula. And so, Coutts was big on that. He sort of stuck with it. I wasn't that keen in terms of, especially when we were racing the defence that year, and that, he put Dean Barker on for the last race, and that was a shock to Barker. He wasn't expecting. I think he was enjoying the whole anonymity of not having to actually front up, but he put him on for the last race. And I went, oh, Christ, I don't know if this is a good idea. Anyway, it turned out pretty good. Dean did a great job, and he'd actually, through that whole campaign, he did a great job. Yeah.
What was the feeling like winning the Cup in home waters? I mean, the only team other than the US to have done it, of course. What did that win mean here in this country?
Well, I think it means they probably don't realise what it means to the actual sailing group, or to win it and defend it, I think, is a big deal. I think it's hard to keep defending it, but to win it and then defend it, it's two very different ways that you have to treat it. And I think we've done it a couple of times. So that group knew how to do that and lifted their game to, from being a challenger. We were a lot better group in 2000 than we were in 95, because we stuck together and we developed as a unit and everything. We were really students of the game.
It's interesting you say that, because we always say, particularly in commentary, we always say, for the defender, they get to, the odds are stacked in favour of the defender. They pick the boat, they pick the venue, they can decide a lot. But yet you say it's much harder to defend. Why is that? Because
you're on your own, and you're always going to be the bad guy in the whole thing, because it's in your patch, it's your, part of the world. You certainly I think with the Version 5 boats, it was a little easier for challenging teams, because the boats got so refined that it was just small parts of them that were, being modified and making a difference, but tiny, tiny things. And so you had to actually get better sailing, like technically sailing the boats. And so we did a lot of that. And nowadays, I think the pendulum's a little bit, I see it as a bit of a pendulum, and so I think it is a bit too far on the defender's side. These new boats, every time they change the boats, it's a raw, very raw thing, and so there's, it's tough for the challenging teams to grasp a new rule, then find the tools to use to design the boat, to come up with a good package. The defender has a better, because he's got over a year of more exposure to what it's going to be. So he's thinking about things a long way ahead of the challengers. So if they keep the same boats for next time, which is, I think, would make a big difference, that would add to more competitors, more, closer racing, and I think it'd be good.
Back in 2000, how did you make it difficult for the challengers? What did you do as defenders?
We did everything we could possibly do. So there was no, initially they were building the viaduct. So there's nowhere to go really here for a 5 metre deep IACC yacht to sail in and out of. So we were over in the naval base, and Luna Rossa, who was they were the challenger of record, they had to come there as well. So, just the procedures of getting in there, tied and difficult, everything like that wasn't easy for any of those teams. And you always fight over the water space. And so we were always aware of that was going to be a key thing. So we got control of the water space from day one, and wouldn't let them sort of get anywhere near the race course that we were going to use that much. So, they in the end, you sort of had one day on and one day off or whatever, but we'd be fighting over it and sail through their race course and, try to just let them know that we're there and we can do what we like, and they can't do any of that. So it was, we were pretty aggressive really, but it was a lot of fun along the way too. I mean, used to have quite a bit of fun with that.
In 2000 then, you beat Luna Rossa 5-0. But then what followed was the dissolution of Team New Zealand. Describe what happened, Brad. How did all that come about?
Actually, it was, it's no one's fault, eh? I think, it sort of gets, everything change. People change as they get older and whatever. But Blake didn't really want to do it anymore. And so he came to me and he said, look, I'm out of it. I've had enough, after this, I'm out. And I said to him, well, Jesus, because that's not what we think. We're in it for this a longer haul, And I said, how's it going to work? Because, this is, you're the head of this group. Sure, Russell was, a leader as well, and definitely the sailing side and, that technical side, he had a huge, that was his baby really. But Blake was the guy that, the country looked to and the sponsors looked to and whatever. And anyway, he said, oh, well, you got to talk to these guys, which are a bunch of, lawyers and accountants that sat on this. And they probably had their heart in the right place, but they really did not. I think they'd seen us grow up, and I think they thought we were always going to be not quite up to it. And they never understood that the hardware doesn't matter. It's all about the software. And they never got that. Even to today, they probably still don't get that.
That it was about the people.
It's
the
about
IP.
the people, yeah. It's got nothing to do with the boat. Who cares about the boats, Boats you can design and build. And they probably, they're going to evolve anyway. But the people, if you lose them. And so I was worried, I'm very worried. And I put a lot of work into it. Over a year, we wasted trying to have a transition agreement with them. And it never worked out. It never got to the end. And actually, the kicker was, because Russell was, he he doesn't leave too many stones unturned. So he was pretty aggressive in that sort of thing. And I think they really, guys like Tom Clark was sitting on that, who are old, fans of Blake. He owned Ceramco that Blake did around the world race on. And he just didn't understand that, losing a guy like Coots was detrimental for a lot of things. There's underneath him, there's another 50 guys just want to leave because he's not the leader of it anymore. And they couldn't understand that doing a transition deal would have been good for everybody. It would have been good for New Zealand. It would have been good for everyone. Barker would have stayed with that group and probably would have steered the boat in the next defence. And, because Russell was more moving, wanted to move more into management rather than keep sailing all the time and stuff like that. But they wouldn't take it on. And so Russell was down. We were right at the crux of it. And I'd sort of almost talked him into it. And Doug Myers, who ran Lion New Zealand only, he was getting on a plane in Queenstown. And I was saying to Russell, well, it looks like they're going to agree to this. So it looks like we can. And he said to Myers said to him, oh, well, how's it going? Russell said, oh, not so good. And he says, oh, you can always go and do something else. So for that, Coots just lost it. He didn't lost it. He just lost his motivation, And me too, I just thought, because these guys he was one of the sponsors and the guy that was trying to controlling things, just didn't get it. Just a hard-assed corporate attitude towards a sporting, difficult situation. And so that he just decided right then, I just said, oh, look, screw it, we're out of it. And he said, yeah, we're out. And at that stage, we were negotiating with ESPN and trying to set the structure for the next time. And it just turned to custard. Yeah, not good. I had to front a press conference down here in the Squadron. And Coots, for some reason, was bloody late getting back into the country, so I had to do it on myself, tell them that we weren't doing it again. Yeah, I always thank him for that.
The Kiwi press are...
Oh, yeah. They got stuck
hard.
in. Yeah, they got stuck in. They didn't want to know the where or why. They had no interest in that. And they actually, when we opted out, we didn't have a job. Look, you could say we're naive thinking that we wouldn't have a job. For sure, I was going to sail for another team, but at that stage we didn't have one. And it was interesting because I was actually leaving the following week to sail in Antigua with Larry Ellison, and he'd heard about it. So I had to go and sit with him on his boat the day I got there, and he offered me a job to do the Oracle campaign. And he'd chosen Dixon as the skipper, and he was getting Bill Erklands to run a group, And I just said to him, I got this other guy. He's pretty good. And a couple of other guys that come with him. And he goes, no, I don't need that. And I said, oh, well, good luck. So that was the end of that. And then I saw him at the Louis Vuitton regatta a couple of years later. He says, have you still got that job? I said, yeah, still got that job. Anyway, he was funny with it, Larry. Yeah.
I mean, quite brave to turn that down. Tell us what happened after that.
Actually, Ernesto Bertarelli was trying to buy a boat off Team New Zealand, and Russell had dealt with him, and he'd come to New Zealand. I guess I met him, but I didn't remember it, and because I was fully immersed in the. And so he spoke to. He was in Europe, and so he spoke to Ernesto. Ernesto said, "Oh, look, what are you guys doing? Because I'm starting this team, and maybe you might be interested." And so Russell started talking to Ernesto, and then I had an agreement with Marco Piccinini, who was the guy that works for Bertelli in the Challenger record, that if we ever left there, we'd tell him. So I told him, and so then he met Russell somewhere in Europe, and he said to him, Brad tells me you're leaving, you're not sailing for Team New Zealand anymore. He says, is that true? And he says, oh, well, I guess if Brad said that, it's true. But they didn't believe it, so they were out of it. And in the end, we actually met with, after I was in Antigua. I went to New York and met with Pirelli, and we had a meeting there and decided to do it with him, and then basically just immersed in that whole thing. And actually Pirelli did another favour to us in terms of he brought a way of doing business that I'd never ever seen before, and breaking the whole thing down like he's building a pharmaceutical product.
Way more professional than you've seen before.
Way more professional than we'd seen in the past, and way more, and just added to, made a huge difference to the way. And we sort of brought a way of running the team and how we should go about it and people we needed to use. And he brought the whole professional side of it and just a different way of doing things, which, was amazing, really.
Well, as you predicted, it wasn't just the two of you and Russell, that left, but also, a band of brothers from Team New Zealand came to Alinghi with you. What was that like, 2003, here with Alinghi? I mean, we've been here for this cup, and I can vouch for the passion of the Kiwi sailing fan. What was it like going about your daily life, all the while sailing for the Swiss, trying to win the cup away from New Zealand?
Yeah, it was sort of, it was a bit, I think people probably underestimated Russell, and maybe me to a certain extent, but also Murray and, Warwick and Simon and Dino and the other guys that we brought with us, the boat builders that came with us, and, that side of it. So, we were sort of, definitely they targeted us, definitely Coots and myself. So we had, wound up with death threats and a lot of animosity towards us guys, But unfortunately, what it did do was just sort of strengthen our resolve, So it made, that's the problem. I don't think you don't want to poke Coots too many times before he pokes you back, So he's that sort of guy. He's live and let live, but, they were pushing us pretty hard, and so we started pushing back. And so it becomes pretty tough. And, I don't think you would, I think we can be tough if we have to. And so that's what happened. And we managed, we sort of, basically we circled the wagons and around that group, and we had Ernesto did a good job in sort of getting the base and putting the money into the base where we could just drive in there, and so I'd just be living at home and driving to work, and doing sailing as much as we possibly could. So it was, we were sort of it was a tough time for both of us, but obviously the rewards were worth it.
I mean, that's a real fortress, isn't it? I mean, in the place you grew up with friends and family everywhere. Yeah, it was tough, huh?
Yeah, even my mother, she wasn't too happy with me. Anyway, she's got over that.
Russell came on the podcast a while back, and he talked vividly, actually, about sailing out every day through the hostile crowd, and actually just that it fueled the fire. That it didn't get to him. He enjoyed it in a kind of way in the end.
Yeah, I guess him. I mean, but between him and I, we did enjoy it because we felt pretty confident in the group that we were with. We had great backup. We had great camaraderie within our group. And we'd had an opportunity to have a clean piece of paper, and he'd done a fantastic job, getting Rob Vrolick to come in and design the boat, and the technical side of it. He'd done a great job in choosing a lot of those people and formulating that group. And Pirelli did a fantastic job in just the culture, manufacturing the right culture, so that we had a balance of fun and professionalism at the same time. And so, Russell was really, he certainly was he put his shoulder into it. And, you know, it was crazy. I mean, it was madness, eh? There was just, I mean, they were trying to put bloody bulletproof vests on us when we towed out. And the thing was absolutely, I had protection, he had protection. A lot of the guys had protection, the Kiwis. You know, so you know, but things were, the local media here, especially the talkback side of it, is a pretty septic culture. And they, you know, they just fueled they started right from the beginning, and it got worse. And then they started a movement around this thing called Blackheart, which was a great name for a group that hated us guys. So we'd have billboards outside our base with, you know, getting stuck into us. And it got out of control, really.
Blackheart, so an organised campaign against...
That's right. It was fueled by a lot of, quite a few of the wealthy guys that had a vested interest that if the Cup left here, it would be bad for them. So, yeah.
What kind of things on the billboards? What did they say?
Oh, I can't remember what it said, but it was, I mean, I think they were targeted Russell more than me, which was good. But, yeah, I don't know. It was, but yeah, it was bad. The whole thing was bad. And they had lunches and get together and, you know, they tried to make it as hard as it possibly could be to live here and compete. And what they didn't get, they just don't get, you know, we're professional sailors, you know, that was our living, you know. And sure, we'd done it for New Zealand, but we'd won it and defended it for New Zealand. And we probably would have stayed if it had been the right way. But definitely Russell, you know, the guys that left, it's changed their lives, you know, a lot for the better.
In what way? Financially?
Well, financially, yes. That's probably one of the, you know, the key thing. But I mean, it's just opened up other, you know, it exposed us to Europe and just all that sort of you can do over there, you know. And so, you know, we sort of had the best of both worlds. We're living down here a lot of the time and working and living in Europe as well. So, you know, it really made a big difference.
We've been here the last nearly 4 months now, sort of embracing the Kiwi media, if you like. I mean, they have long memories. What's it like now? I mean, you're living here a lot of the time, Brad. You know, do people still remember?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, you know, you because you're well known, you just, and, you know, like I don't want to hide from that. I'm quite proud of what we've done, and so, you know, I'm happy to stand up and be counted on all those sort of things, and so are the other guys. So, you know, the sport's been good to us, but, you know, we love the sport, and so it's, you know, people should realise that it is like that, and things have changed here. You know, the rugby players play overseas, and there's a different mentality for it than it was in those days, where, you know, it really turned nasty. Yeah. To this day, I'm still not happy with what happened there. I'm going to take it out of the hands of the sailors and I'll put it in the hands of the lawyers. And that's what happened.
Well, of course, you didn't just defect to the Swiss team. You, Russell Coates, the rest of the guys, you took the cup away from New Zealand, or certainly that's how they'd see it. I mean, did that change the way people treated you here at all? And I mean, can you remember what that was like? I mean, it must be weird. It's your home country, yet you're winning the cup for another. I mean, just describe that moment.
Well, it was just, yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a tinge of disappointment for sure in terms of the, you know, just how it all happened in the end, you know. But you know, there was a lot of elation in terms of how well, you know, this first time team, you know, it just showed, you know, especially, I guess, you know, especially Coots himself, how, you know, the transition between defending for New Zealand and then challenging out of the blue into a brand new team, you know. And okay, we had a billionaire as a backer and he was sailing with us on the boat, which makes a huge difference because he sees it firsthand. He understands the problems that you're facing, you know. And so just to do that, I think that was one of the biggest mountains you could climb, you know. And so he, you know, just I think that as a group, we the key guys that had done it for New Zealand, but also then moved to Alinghi, they really got up, and sort of brought the best out of a lot of the other guys. Like, Rolf Vrolik, he was a standout. He's his character, sort of, he's not just a designer, he's, whispering in your ear, you should have tacked there, or you should have done that, He's a sailor. So, those guys, we had a great group, really. And, you wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change a thing. It was just a pity it had to happen here.
Well, you won the cup, and then you can do what you like with it. And the next cup was to be in Valencia, which, you went on to win your 4th cup win. It's unbelievable, Brad. But early on in that Valencia campaign, the wheels fell off Alinghi a little bit, didn't they? There was an acrimonious split with Russell. What happened there, and how difficult was that? You'd been together for such a long time.
Yeah, I sort of, him and the administration side of it. So there was a couple of other guys that were instrumental in that, but Russell himself, I guess he lost a bit of trust there. You'd have to ask him exactly what he was thinking. But right from the get-go, I basically talked to him about that, and he said, "Oh, look, you should stay here and keep it going, and it's not your fight." And I actually didn't want to fight with Ernesto, I had nothing but good times with him and a great relationship with him. And by then we had hired Peter Homburg as one of the sailors, and of course we had Joachim Schumann and Grant Simmer. We'd brought Grant Simmer in to help us with design to start with, but also management, because Grant's good with that. He likes working out where the money's going. Anyway, we had the basis of a good group, and Rolf was obviously still with us, and so we had to pick. It was a bad. To this day, I'm still, not happy with what happened there, and it just pitted. He just sort of left, and it wasn't a great outcome for him as well. I certainly didn't want him to go. Tried like hell to try to talk him out of it, and got nowhere, which is normal.
You did win the cup, but and after that win, just think back. It was quite a bad time in Cupland, wasn't it? Alinghi held the cup. A challenger of record was declared. Oracle contested it. By now fronted by Coots, he was now Oracle, and the whole thing ended up in court. What was the big problem with all of that?
Well, the defence in Valencia was actually, we were lucky because we hired Ed Baird, really. I'd had history with Ed Baird. With 95, he was the the other helmsman. So he did, that guy is handy. He's in your top 5. And basically he came in after being on the commentary team for the actual cup here in New Zealand, and wound up getting another shot to actually sail again, and just really showed how good he was in terms of he just sort of, it was either going to be him or Homburg, and I think it was always going to be Ed, and Peter's a great sailor and in his own right, and can do thing, and he certainly he gets fired up, that's for sure. But Ed is just another level, I think, and so that went to there, and we actually won in a really I think one of the best sort of exhibitions of two very good teams sailing at a high level. You had Terry Hutchinson doing tactics and Barker sailing the boat, and really good sailors on board a Boateam design boat, which was, as good as us, just it didn't tack as well. And, that's what you see in those first few parts of the match itself, is just the strengths and the weaknesses of the other boats. And we were sailing very well, I think, and did some dumb things and did some good things, but in the end won. And then I sort of got a heads up that there was trouble brewing over that, because Oracle were the challenger of record. The Golden Gate Yacht Club was the challenger of record. Not the Golden Gate. Was it the Golden Gate? No, it was the, what do they call themselves? I think it was the Golden Gate. Golden Gate Yacht Club. I'm thinking of St. Francis because that's the big one there. But the Golden Gate Yacht Club was the challenger of record. And actually the relationship we had with them was a good one, because the deal that we had with them, we shared, because the America's Cup's a trust, you share the income from it between the defender and the challengers. And so the deal they did, they split the money. So in the end, Team New Zealand wound up with €10 million out of what was being paid for by Valencia and the EU to have the America's Cup there. So, it was a good deal for everybody. Okay, Alinghi won, and they got to do it again. And the next one was actually a bigger deal. But actually the designers wanted to change the boat to like a 90-foot, and then you wind up with all these, he said, she said, and you've got an advantage because you've designed the boat already, and blah, blah, blah. And then a few of the advisors to Ernesto wanted to use the yacht club in Spain. And so should have used the Royal Thames Yacht Club that Keith Mills was using for, but in the end they chose that. And I think Larry was sick of losing. That's what I think has happened. And he thought, bugger it, I'm going to take it out of the hands of the sailors and I'll put it in the hands of the lawyers. And that's what happened. And, I went through that whole process and watched it, and I couldn't believe it was just a waste of everyone's time and money, And okay, the boats they built looked amazing, these big spiders sort of sailing around, but, was it really good for the sport? I don't think so. I think it was bad. It just put everybody on hold for a long time, and, a lot of guys lost their jobs, and it was, it's just a dumb thing, really. I thought the whole thing should have worked out some other way. But that's the America's Cup.
I mean, as you say, it was a long time in litigation, but the outcome was the deed of gift match in Valencia. 2 giant multi-hulls, the defender against the challenger. And on Alinghi, your backer, team owner Ernesto Bertarelli, steering the boat. I mean, I was there, we were filming it for CNN, and it was so dramatic, this sort of winter, early spring week in Valencia. I mean, did that set off alarm bells with you at all, that, here was Ernesto wanting to drive the machine?
Well, I guess he was sailing, he'd won the Cup twice sailing on board. So he'd been, he's a handy sailor. And I think he thought he was sailing those D35s on the Lake of Geneva. And so the guys that were actually in our group that were sailing against him would have a hard time beating him. So he's not, he's pretty handy at sailing a multi-hull, But we had a couple of other guys, French guys that sailed with us, and all very well known. And I think in the end, Ernesto paid for that whole thing. That was his deal. The sponsorship disappeared, and we actually wound up sharing those helming responsibilities a little bit, and with other guys. But in the end, I think he sailed the boat probably as fast as it was going to be sailed. I was more worried that the thing was going to fold in half and sink.
It did feel like that, and actually both boats. We were waiting. I mean, everybody was waiting for something to happen.
Yeah. Because we had a smattering of, there's a lot of French guys like Alain Gauthier was sailing with us, and but I think those guys really didn't understand how critical it was that if we broke the thing, that was it. We couldn't fix it in time to, we just had the things were 120 feet long and huge, semi-winged, the masts were unbelievably expensive. Everything's expensive, you know. Everything's ridiculous, you know. I mean, Luke Perron I think he did a great job, and you know, for his part of it. But the whole thing was nonsense, you know. It shouldn't have happened, and I hope it never happens again. You know, I hope they don't go there. When Faye did it with the big boat versus the multi-hull with Dennis, that was another stupid era for the Cup, you know. But I think the guys, when you're the defender, there's got to be a bit more balance in between the two groups. And how you get that, I don't know. If the principals are difficult guys, you're never going to get there. And Larry's, he's a difficult guy.
How hard was it losing that deed of gift match?
Oh, look, losing doesn't sit that well, I don't think, with any of the guys in our group. And we didn't do that to lose, but we were, you know, we always felt we were on the back foot with that, because they'd developed that boat a year before we had actually finished the defence of the America's Cup. They were building that boat. So they'd start to build that boat a long time before we actually finished the Cup. So they you know, he had a plan, a long-term plan. And, you know, that's the game, really. You can do it that way if you want to. And the Cup is like that. It's, you know, it's susceptible to a deed of gift challenge at any time. And even now, these guys will be worried about that looking forward.
That's interesting. Why do you say that?
Because both Luna Rossa and Team New Zealand are susceptible to a deed of gift challenge. You know, you're susceptible to a wealthy guy coming in and trying to challenge you straight away, and then try to fight that off. If he is disgruntled about the way things are going, he might do a deed of gift challenge, and then you'll say, oh no, I've already got a challenge. You wait in line, and next minute he takes you to court, and you go to court in New York. So it's if it's an American team, you don't want to poke the bear too many times, because he might wind up in a New York court, and that's not I don't think he can win there.
There's a lot going on, isn't there? Not just on the racetrack.
No, there's a lot going on.
Brad, you wrote about this concept of the Cup, I think, which suggests that it's really important to you, that the Cup is the pinnacle of our sport, and it should always be the pinnacle of our sport, that settling it in the courtroom isn't what it's about. I mean, what was your thinking behind all of that?
Well, I mean, the America's Cup, I think, is the pinnacle of yacht racing. It should be the pinnacle of yacht racing. And whether you are a traditionalist or a modern era guy, the Cup's been around, 180 years or whatever. It is the pinnacle of sailing. There's not another part of sailing that gets so much resource and money thrown at it to try and win it. And I think if there was some sort of structure that you could come up that really evolved it. So if you look at what happened here when Team New Zealand won it, that whole concept of having the bases around the viaduct, it just changed things. I mean, it was just really if you ever went to Newport where all the teams were lined up around down Thames Street, something pretty special really. And then the viaduct thing worked very well. And then Valencia was a huge moment for the sport, I think, because you had 13 teams, all got bases, all got, it was a heady, you could see it being more like a Formula One competition, which is what, whether they like it or not, is what the teams aspire to be. Because they look at Formula One, they try to get a Formula One team to help them, and they try to aspire to be like a Formula One team. And it's not like that. It's not at that level, but it could be. And going to court and arguing over it just, I don't know, it's not, to me it just doesn't sit right, because the sport should be all about, I like watching I like watching sport at any lot of sport, like rugby or whatever, or tennis or whatever, anything that's on TV that you can see it being played at the highest degree. And sportsmen and sportswomen want to show their skills off, and they don't want to win 7-0. They want to win, but they want to show that it's not that easy, that they've got to a level that is. And so when you watch rugby, I can talk to a guy that plays an All Black. I don't understand that game like he does. Or even if you take golf, I play golf, but I don't play what the professionals play. They play another game. And sailing's like that. I can talk to Peter Burling or James Spittle about what they're doing, and I might have a better idea than most, but they're current and at the top of their game, and they are at a level that is far and beyond a club sailor or whatever, and that's where the America's Cup should be.
Let's talk about the number of competitors, which is a frequent criticism of the Cup, particularly at the moment. And we've had 3 challengers here, but if you look back at other campaigns, we often see, say, a US boat populated by Aussies, or Lingy as an example, where the nationality rule was removed on crew members. You know, Lingy was a pretty diverse crew. Where do you sit on that? Either option is problematic in a way.
Nationality.
Yeah.
I think, to me, nationality doesn't exist. It's a myth, if you ask me, because it's just a financial rule. So you can have anybody it doesn't matter, you can hire somebody from overseas, you just have to jump through the hoops that they make you jump through. So if there's a nationality clause like there is in the Cup now, who's it really there for? Is it for the local team? Actually, what it's doing is stopping the teams coming down here early and sailing here, because they have to fit into a nationality clause or whatever. I think you're better off to put your effort into encouraging participation. And whether it's an EU team, it could be an EU team, or some other group that get themselves together, they still have to have a yacht club that they represent. But I think it's a real draconian way of doing it, is having a nationality rule, because I think that's people that don't understand the America's Cup. The America's Cup is a regatta between yacht clubs. You can bring the parochialism of the countries into it, but say the UK, they could have the Royal Yacht Squadron and, the Handball Yacht Club, both challenging for the UK. There's no difference between those groups, but one's a yacht club up the Handball and one's sitting on the end of the Isle of Wight. I just think they should get away from that, get more into encouraging participation, letting other teams have whoever they want. I mean, if they want to put a salary cap or a cap, I mean, the New York Yacht Club just come out with a protocol that is 140 pages long, but in it they have a suggested cap of what the team should spend, and it's probably the way forward, really.
What is it about the Cup, Brad? I mean, you've invested a lot of your career, your time, an awful lot of energy into chasing it. Why is it so special to you?
I guess it was because it was unattainable here as a kid. So I grew up here, we looked at the America's Cup, I grew up sailing with all these other guys, we used to sail dinghies and whatever, but it was something that was unattainable as a Kiwi guy, So guys that were sailing overseas really, for us, it was probably Peter Blake was the first of the guys that was, sailing on one of the big maxis for that Bob Bell, I think Condor or Bermuda or whatever it was called. Anyway, I think he was the first of the Kiwis that sort of pushed out overseas. But actually in the Cup game, there was nobody. It was something that we could look at, dream about, never never ever think of that you'd actually be in it or win it. It was something unattainable. And that's, why 83 was such a big moment for New Zealand and for us guys, because it sort of made you think, well, maybe, So that's what the Cup, and it still is to me. I think it's very hard to win, really hard to win. It's not something, all those things have got to be right, You have to make, it's not just one person or, it's a real team effort, and the money has to be available, the resources got to be available, the people have got to make the right decisions. It's, it's a complex game, and I've just been lucky. I think I've been lucky because I've been, exposed to guys that are, fantastic at that.
You've achieved an awful lot in a stellar career, sailing in some of modern sailing's most celebrated campaigns. What would you have done differently? Where would you have changed things if you could go back and do things differently?
Oh, I don't know. Probably, like maybe spend a bit more time sailing dinghies a bit longer. I sort of graduated to keelboats quite quickly, and that, was good and bad. But in those days you sort of stuck as a laser sailor, and they're not a great boat to sail. And I was always a bit small for a fin, but probably fit the fin now. Anyway, so it's not, I probably could have sailed in dinghies a little bit longer. But, I wouldn't change much, I wouldn't change much. I would just, things sort of, life's a bit like that. You sort of get to, there's options. You can choose one path or another. And I've been a bit lucky. I've, made a few mistakes, but I've wound up with the right people that have helped me in my career, and they have helped me. I've had a lot of help in being on winning teams and having, now obviously lifelong friends that we've experienced all this together.
Made a few good tactical decisions, not just tactical.
That's right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I'm like, well, I guess that's a gene, isn't it? You must somebody gave it to me. Yeah.
Brad, thank you. It's been a fascinating listen. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime, Shirley. Thank you.
Brad Butterworth, love him. An astonishing career, a ruthless approach, and with hindsight, it's not unfair to say he really accelerated the professionalism of our sport. America's Cup sailors that followed, be grateful. Brad and his peers opened the door. We love to hear from you, so let me know what you think. Like and review and subscribe on whatever platform you join us on. And buy us a coffee if you've enjoyed the pod. buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. I get all the credit, but Tim at Vertigo Films actually makes these pods the lovely things they are. Massive attention to detail, editing and producing each one. Big thanks to Tim. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10-5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.